Good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up at the top of the next hour, Charlie Spearing, former White House correspondent for Breitbart News, author of the book Amateur Hour, Kamala Harris in the White House. We'll talk to him about the latest Veep news, and we'll chat with you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Ahead, I want to talk about what's happening on our border. Democrats now pressuring the President of the United States to federalize Texas's National Guard in order to open the border up even more. What's going to happen? A lot of Republicans making statements on that. Donald Trump is adding his voice to it. We'll discuss. That's ahead on the show. And you can join us at 888-630-9625. Joining me now is a congressman who represents Georgia's 11th Congressional District, and he's been digging into the events of January 6, 2021, and so many of the unanswered questions about that day, the federal government's behavior and Democrats' behavior in Congress as well. Congressman Barry Loudermilk is here. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Well, it's good to be with you. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Let's. Well, the reason we invited you out is the topic I'd like to start with, which is, Nancy Pelosi assembled a committee, a January 6th committee, and without getting any buy-in from the opposing party, the Republicans. So as far as I can tell, an illegitimate committee, but they did their actions, and they gathered a bunch of documents, and then before they handed over the keys to the Republicans, they deleted a ton of stuff. What could you tell us?
Well, I can't verify that they destroyed documents, as some have said. I do know they deleted some, but we definitely know documents are missing. And the way we came about this is they were supposed to preserve, according to House rules, according to all precedent, they have to preserve all the information, all the transcribed interviews, all the investigative material that they acquired during their investigation. That is part of the official House records. Then that is supposed to be turned over to the clerk. As we started our committee, then the clerk was to turn all of that information over to my committee, which the clerk handed over everything they had. Early on into the investigation last year, when we received it, it was not what I expected. I expected a database that they were using with everything digitized where we could get right into it and get to work. What I received were boxes and boxes of printed documents, over 1 million printed pages, not categorized, not cataloged, just like, basic information. And we were supposed to receive about 4 terabytes of digital data, which out of the 5 or so hard drives they gave us, we only had about 2 terabytes.
But you knew that 4 terabytes existed. They only gave you 2.
Well, I didn't know it at the time. The way I found out that there were 4 terabytes is when I had an attorney call me who had represented Cassidy Hutchinson originally in her first testimonies, which significantly changed later on.
Right.
And he wanted to review the videotapes. He informed me that they videotaped every deposition. Every interview was videotaped. And he wanted to review the videotapes of his depositions with Cassidy Hutchinson. Well, we couldn't find not only that one, we could find no videos whatsoever. They were missing. So I wrote Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who was the chairman of the committee, the select committee, and asked him, where are these videos? And by the way, we also found a letter that he had written to the White House and one to Homeland Security, sending documents to them, House documents. He was sending them House documents for the White House and Homeland Security to keep, which is unprecedented, and these are House documents. So I asked him about those in the letter. In that letter, he came back and said, we just chose not to keep the videos, and we gave you 4 terabytes of data. That's how I found out there were 4 terabytes, but we had less than 3 terabytes of data. And so that prompted us to dig a little deeper, let's say.
Sorry, what did he mean when he said we chose not to keep the videos? The core work of the committee was these video depositions. Why? Does that mean they deleted the video of the depositions?
We don't know. We don't have them. And so the standard operating procedure when you do a transcribed interview, and like interviews we've done with people that we brought in our investigation. You call the House Clerk's office, they send someone in to actually do the recording of it, the court reporter type thing. But you also call the House recording studio, and they bring in the cameras and they videotape it. Well, we contacted the House recording studio, and they informed us that they were not allowed to actually keep the recordings, that the Select Committee only borrowed their equipment and they did all the work themselves, which really raises suspicion is, did they intend on getting rid of these all along? But Liz Cheney, in her book right now, talks about how important it was to videotape all of these interviews because of the transparency, and the American people had the right to know what really happened. Well, somewhere along the way, somebody determined we didn't want to keep those. And so that is what really prompted us to dig deeper. So we hired a forensics team to come in and do a low-level scraping of the 5 hard drives they gave us. And that's when we started finding documents that we did not have, that were either deleted in some cases or hidden in hidden folders, that according to the company, is a third-party company we hired to do the forensics, is that they were purposefully hidden, and they were designed really, we would not have gotten them if they had not gone in and did this procedure. Well, over 100 of those documents, some we recovered, we were able to see, and were able to verify that these were associated to some of the documents they sent to the White House. Let me put it that way. Ironically, some of those were deleted just days before the Republicans took over, and they were supposed to hand us over.
Importantly,
but the majority of those documents are password protected and encrypted, so we can't access them. So I have asked Benny Thompson, just give me the password. If there's nothing to this, then first of all, why did you guys delete some of the documents? Why did you hide other documents? And then why are they password protected? And so in the meantime, I've also written letters to the White House and to the Department of Homeland Security demanding that they return the House documents. So far, the Homeland Security has ignored both of the letters that I sent, and the deadline for them to respond was yesterday. The White House responded to one of the letters I sent to them, and they provided us with their 4 documents after they redacted them. And they're so heavily redacted that there are multiple pages of just blacked out lines. So they're redacting House information to give it back to the House. So I sent them another letter, basically said, either give me all the documents or I'm going to subpoena for them. And we did hear back from the White House yesterday, just before the deadline, and says, we need a little bit more time, and we'll get them to you. What takes more time for you to put them in an envelope and deliver them to the White House or to the Capitol? That's all it takes. What do you need time to re-redact what you've already redacted? That's not acceptable. We need all of the documents.
So you described that Democrats did share these documents with places like the White House, and who else did they share them with, to your knowledge?
They also shared documents with the Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney, Fonnie Willis.
That's what I wanted to know.
In fact, as it's coming out now, they had, it appears, multiple meetings to where it looks like, and Jim Jordan, my good friend, chairs the Judiciary Committee, is digging deeper into this as well, is that her boyfriend that she hired to help with the investigation actually came and sat down with committee staff and spent hours going through documents. And so my interest is, what documents did they have access to? Are there documents that I'm missing? Why does she get to see documents that we potentially did not? But the interesting thing to me is all of the documents that I know about, for instance, the documents at the White House and at Homeland Security, are people who were with Donald Trump on January the 6th. They were either Secret Service agents or they were White House employees that had direct access to him. And just from what the White House has sent us, the heavily redacted documents, just reading the unredacted portions, you can derive from those that these witnesses were probably not giving the select committee the story that they wanted to hear. And so my suspicion is that any document that doesn't support their narrative, that's what's missing. And look, what happened on January 6th, there was tremendous violence at the Capitol. I was there. We all know what happened. But the American people need to know the truth about this, not what was in this cherry-picked and predetermined narrative of the January 6th report.
Congressman Loudermilk, earlier in the conversation, you said you don't have many of the videos. Do you have any of the video depositions or none of them?
We don't have any of the full videos. The only videos that they have that they preserved were the ones that they actually used portions of them in their televised hearings.
Right.
You know, they actually hired a Hollywood producer to
Yes.
come in and help them put together these shows, TV shows. So they actually used snippets from some of the depositions in those hearings. That is the only part that they preserve that we have.
Do you have written transcripts of depositions?
We do. Well, of most of them. Now, there are some, as we were talking about, from the White House, that was sent to the White House and DHS. We don't.
Okay.
But we do have the written ones, and that's what Benny Thompson is saying. Why do you need the videos? You have the written transcripts. Well, here's the reason. There's body language. There's voice inflection.
Sure.
There's the looks on their faces. There's things that make a difference. For instance, there's a huge difference between, hypothetically, someone saying, I shot the clerk versus I shot the clerk. There's a significant difference there that you don't get in a written transcript.
Yeah, that wasn't captured on privately on somebody's cell phone in some private home. It was captured in the United States Congress for the American people, and as a result, your committee should have it. Before I let you go, I saw this week with some interest a thread from one of your colleagues, Thomas Massie, who was emphasizing this pipe bomb saga and everything that you Republicans in Congress have learned about it.
Yes.
It seems to me a massive mystery. But why are we just finding out now that the man who first spotted the bomb outside of the DNC was actually a plainclothes Capitol Police officer? And what else are you learning that the American people deserve to know about?
Well, there's several things about this, and Thomas Massie has done a great job really digging into this. We've been working with him as we find information, sharing it with him. But it was just recently revealed that was actually as you said, plainclothes Capitol Police officer who found the pipe bomb. The thing that I find most interesting is the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was in the DCCC. Secret Service was outside in an SUV, literally feet from this pipe bomb. We have videos, security videos from the night before when the pipe bomb was left, and you can see where it was placed. It was placed to be found. It was obvious. How did the Secret Service not find this if they're supposed to be coming and sweeping the area before the Vice President-elect who is going to be there? How does Secret Service miss this when it was literally feet away from the SUV that they were sitting in, where they're supposed to be protecting the vice president? There's just so many things that are just strange that we need to get more answers on. Even the gallows is something we've been looking into. These gallows were actually erected early in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. How did those stay up all day without some law enforcement coming and taking it down? They stayed up until in the evening. You would think that a police officer coming by and seeing a set of gallows on Capitol property, that would raise a little suspicion. And so that's something else we're looking into is, even besides who actually erected the gallows, is how did they stay up all day? What's going on here? There's just too many strange incidences beyond even just the suppression of intelligence. We know for a fact that many of the intelligence agencies had intelligence about a pending attack on the Capitol. President Trump was briefed about it 2 days before January 6th. He ordered the National Guard to be ready and even used the term, we need 10,000 troops ready to deploy. That we have that evidence. It's been there for a long time. There's something else the Select Committee overlooked. But then the U.S. Capitol Police Intelligence Division, they get that same intelligence and they don't pass it along to their chief. but yet it appears that leaders of the Democrats in the House knew of it, but not the chief of police. I mean, there's just too many strange circumstances, and I can tell you there has been a lot of politicization by Democrats of the Capitol Police and Capitol Hill security for many, many years, and that has to change.
Lastly, the Massey tweets that I saw that really caught my attention were his conversations with an FBI official called Stephen D'Antuono. And apparently he's the same man who worked in Michigan at the very time that the FBI was plotting out an effort to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer and to make it appear that Trump supporters were out of control. And then he moves to D.C. He's there for January 6th. And then when he testifies to your committee, seems to forget every possible detail about the pipe bombs. And then at one point says the reason they don't have any of the cell phone data from the guy who planted it is because conveniently that data was corrupted. They're not able to figure out who it was. You have to be deeply suspicious of our federal government based on all of that.
Of course. I mean, first of all, our founders intended for us to have a healthy distrust of government, right? But I can imagine they never thought that it would get to this level that look, the majority of people, like 85% of the people, distrust their federal government. And it's because of things like this. When you look at the number of hours and agents that they have spent on prosecuting people, yes, there's people who went into the Capitol on January 6th that should be prosecuted. But the number of people that they're spending the number of hours on to go after them for what should be a misdemeanor trespass, but yet they're pulling people off the investigation of the pipe bomber or the person that erected the gallows makes no sense whatsoever.
No.
And also the threats against their own officers of retaliation that come and they speak to us. These are things that have to be corrected. We have to expose the corruption that does exist in our government, unfortunately. But I don't think it's beyond repair. But the only way you get there is through transparency. And everything that we're doing is to get to the truth because the American people deserve to know the truth about what happened on January 6th.
I totally agree. Congressman Loudermilk, please come back soon. We'd love to get updates from you on what you're digging into. Thank you for your time today, sir.
We'll be glad to. Thank you.
We've got ourselves a Mexican standoff on our southern border between the federal government and the state of Texas. Now, 24 Republican governors joining the fray. Donald Trump has just weighed in, and Democrats are calling to federalize the Texas National Guard. I've got all the updates moments away. Well, good afternoon to you. 435 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the show, we'll be joined by Charlie Spearing, former White House correspondent for Breitbart News, and the author of the book Amateur Hour, Kamala Harris in the White House. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Oh, boy. You have Democrats in Congress who want to take over the Texas National Guard now and seize it from the Lone Star State and bring it under Joe Biden's control. 2 Democrat members of the House of Representatives have urged President Joe Biden to federalize the Texas National Guard on Wednesday. Republican Governor Greg Abbott of Texas issued a defiant statement after the Supreme Court ruled the Biden administration could cut concertina wire placed by the state on the border, in which he said the National Guard was among agencies erecting barriers. Democratic Representatives Joaquin Castro and Greg Casar, both of Texas, demanded that Biden seize control of the National Guard in response to the statement. Quote, Governor Greg Abbott is using the Texas National Guard to obstruct and create chaos at the border, Castro posted on X, formerly known as Twitter. Quote, if Abbott is defying yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, POTUS needs to establish sole federal control of the Texas National Guard now. Now, this is rich for a million different reasons. But let's begin with the start of that statement, that Greg Abbott is trying to obstruct and create chaos at the border. It is the opposite. It is the opposite. The only thing he's obstructing on the portions of the border that he's wielding any control over are foreign nationals pouring in. That's the obstruction. And that is his constitutional right and obligation. In fact, that's the federal government's obligation. They're failing. Texas is doing what they have to here. Also, chaos at the border. Ridiculous. It's not Abbott who's causing the chaos. Abbott, to the extent that he's doing anything here, is attempting to address the chaos. So that's all the case. And while it is within the power of the president to federalize the National Guard, which is something that Donald Trump wanted to do to rescue American cities from chaos, and Democrats lost their minds over because Donald Trump was trying to not cause disorder but restore order in American cities. The New York Times editorial page went crazy when Tom Cotton attempted to run that op-ed. You remember the saga? They fired the opinion editor of the New York Times for daring to run an op-ed saying that it was time to send in the National Guard to restore order to America's cities. So Republicans wanted to use the National Guard to restore order. Democrats want to seize the National Guard to cause more disorder, more chaos. That's what they desire. And then finally, this idea that Abbott is defying the Supreme Court is, I'm going to add, this is just add it to the pile, fake news. Fake news. The Supreme Court's order has nothing to do with Texas's behavior. They vacated an injunction against the Biden administration's behavior. That's what it was about. It was not about Texas. Texas has been putting up these border barriers, obviously. The Biden administration has been cutting through them. So what does Texas do? In October, Ken Paxton, they file suit and they say, we're suing the federal government for the destruction of Texas state property. They're destroying our property. They shouldn't do this. They work through the courts. They get an injunction imposed on the federal government stopping them. You're not allowed to do this anymore. You cannot destroy our border barriers. And so in the past week, the Supreme Court comes out and goes, no, look, the case is still being litigated, but in the meantime, the feds are allowed to destroy the barriers if they so desire. So that's where we are right now. So Texas, by putting up more border barrier, is not in any way defying the United States Supreme Court because the decision had nothing to do with Texas's behavior. Now, you will almost not see that explanation practically anywhere. Now, people in conservative media, of course, are bringing it up because this is the place where you can actually find out what's going on. But in the legacy press, in the corporate left-wing press, there are far too many people who either have no idea what they're talking about or are actively abetting the lie. They're defying the Supreme Court here. They are not, in any sense. And just to add one more piece of evidence, you remember Beto O'Rourke? Remember that guy? Roberto? Down in Texas. He's a couch surfer who routinely runs for political office. He tweeted yesterday, Abbott is using the Texas Guard to defy a Supreme Court ruling. When Governor Faubus did this in 1957, Eisenhower federalized the Arkansas Guard to ensure compliance with the law. Biden must follow this example of bold, decisive leadership to end this crisis before it gets worse. That's what he said yesterday, relying on Wikipedia to inform his tweet. So he's wrong. He's just wrong. They're not defying a Supreme Court ruling in Texas. They're standing on the constitutional principle of defending themselves against an invasion, A. And B, this has nothing to do with Texas's behavior and everything to do with the federal government's. So boom, boom, boom. Now, again, that's not stopping Democrats. There are Democrats all over the place who are calling for federalizing the National Guard now to enhance their tyranny and not to bring about order, but instead to extend disorder. And so today, there were a couple of questions to the White House about this. And let me see if I can play some audio for you here. This is an Air Force One gaggle, the meaning reporters surrounding the person they're speaking to. A Biden spokeswoman, Olivia Dalton, aboard Air Force One, is asked about all of this. And she says, Biden's definitely working to secure the border. Here she is lying to you.
I mean, the president has been clear in stressing the importance of action on the border, going back to last year when he put forward his supplemental request, which included resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. More than 2,000 more personnel on the border. This is a president who knows we need action and is working in good faith to try to make that happen. And we just see no reason for politics to get in the way here.
All they want is to accelerate more foreign nationals in. That's it. Game, set, match. There's nothing else here. They're not trying to stop people. They're trying to send more people down to process them in. John Kirby was asked about this today.
Administration considering federalizing the Texas National Guard?
I talked about this the other day. I don't have any decisions with respect to that to speak to for the president. No, I don't have anything on that.
Is the administration considering federalizing the Texas National Guard? A White House spokesman, John Kirby, the adult spokesman for the White House, says, quote, I don't have any decisions with respect to that. Now, the headline there is White House leaves open the possibility of federalizing the Texas National Guard. He did not, as you probably noted, rule it out at all. He left it wide open that may very well happen. Coringe was asked on CNN today about this.
Homeland Security Department has asked for access to this park that is now currently in dispute. It doesn't seem like they've gotten it. They now are allowed to cut down razor wire. Yeah. Some Democrats are saying the president needs to federalize the Texas National Guard.
So look,
is that something that could happen?
I mean, look, I'll say this. The Border Patrol agents are now, as you said, allowed to cut through the wire because...
I will say, do you ever think, that anyone actually has Coringe sit in on a briefing or any important conversation to clue her in as to what's going on? Or do they just exclude her and they're like, hey, try and keep your head above water, honey?
Look, that's something that could happen?
I mean, look, I'll say this. The Border Patrol agents are now, as you said, allowed to cut through the wire because of what the Supreme Court has laid out. It's unfortunate that we had to go there. It's unfortunate that there is a governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, who has politicized this issue of what's happening on the border.
What does the average news consumer who's watching CNN think of this? I mean, you just had the White House press secretary admit that the Biden administration is destroying the border. She just said it on national television. Finally, we can cut open the border again. Woo! Just thank goodness. She wipes the sweat from her brow and throws it to the ground. We were so nervous about that. Lucky for you, America, we're opening the border back up.
It's unfortunate that there is a governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, who has politicized this issue of what's happening on the border.
Politicized?
And it's not making people's lives safer. It's actually making it harder for law enforcement at the border to do their job. And so we have been very clear.
It's making it more difficult for foreign nationals to invade our country.
We want to make sure we get something done at the border. That's why we've been having these conversations with Senate Republicans and Democrats for the past several weeks to come up with a bipartisan agreement to deal with the border. And look, the governor is not interested in that. Governor Abbott is not interested in that. He wants to politicize an issue, and he's not helping communities. He actually isn't. And he's actually putting Border Patrol agents in harm's way by doing what he's doing. I'm not going to speak to any actions that the president might take, may not take, but we have been very clear on this.
So she leaves it on the table, too. She says the Texas National Guard may actually be federalized by the federal government in an effort to stop Texas from securing their borders. That's the message out of the Biden administration today. And she says that Greg Abbott's making it less safe. In fact, it's less safe for the Border Patrol. That's funny because the Border Patrol union says they love what Texas is doing. They love it. It's better for their agents, who they'd prefer not get wounded by invading foreign nationals, which, of course, it happened this week. Did you see? It was Bill Maloogian, who is a great source of border information, who shared an image of a Border Patrol agent grievously wounded, a rock to the head. They had to blur his face. That's how damaged it was. It's crazy. It's crazy. And that's because of Biden, not Greg Abbott. Now, I have my criticisms of Abbott, including he's in India right now for a 10-day trip that he should not be on. He should end it now and come home. It's an economic development trip. Who cares? You're a governor. You're a governor of Texas. Get your butt back to Texas and secure the border. Secure the border. It's important that you're there. You don't have to be, firing a pepper ball gun at the border as the governor, but you should be there. And today, we've got a whole bunch of governors who are standing in solidarity with Texas. I'm going to quote from one of their websites. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has posted this. Governor Reynolds and 24 Republican governors joint statement supporting the state of Texas's constitutional right to self-defense. Today, Governor Kim Reynolds issued a joint statement, 24 Republican governors, in support of Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Texas's constitutional right to self-defense. Quote, President Biden and his administration have left Americans in our country completely vulnerable to unprecedented illegal immigration pouring across the southern border. Instead of upholding the rule of law and securing the border, the Biden administration has attacked and sued Texas for stepping up to protect American citizens from historic levels of illegal immigrants, deadly drugs like fentanyl, and terrorists entering our country. We stand in solidarity with our fellow governor, Greg Abbott, and the state of Texas in utilizing every tool and strategy, including razor wire fences, to secure the border. We do it in part because the Biden administration is refusing to enforce immigration laws already on the books and is illegally allowing mass parole across America of migrants who enter our country illegally. The authors of the U.S. Constitution made clear, ready? Here's the constitutional rationale, delivered by 24 Republican governors across the country today, have made clear that in times like this, states have a right of self-defense. Under Article 4, Section 4, which dictates that the federal government is supposed to protect our borders, and Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which that's the part that says that states can defend their integrity from invasion. Because the Biden administration has abdicated its constitutional compact duties to the states, Texas has every legal justification to protect the sovereignty of our states and our nation. There's a lot of governors here, a lot of governors listed here. I just looked it up. I was trying to verify how many Republican governors are there, because are they all the signatories? Because we have 24 signatories here. There are apparently 27 Republican governors right now, so there's some stragglers out there who are not on this particular list, but among them, Kay Ivey of Alabama, Mike Dunleavy of Alaska, Sarah Sanders of Arkansas, Ron DeSantis of Florida. Let me add an additional credit to DeSantis. DeSantis has had law enforcement for many months in Texas helping out in Texas to secure the border to the extent that they can do that at all. Brian Kemp in Georgia, Brad Little, Idaho, Eric Holcomb, Indiana, Jeff Landry, Louisiana, Tate Reeves, Mississippi, Mike Parson in Missouri, Greg Gianforte in Montana, Jim Pillen in Nebraska, Joe Lombardo, Nevada, Chris Sununu, New Hampshire, Doug Burgum, North Dakota, Mike DeWine, Ohio, Kevin Stitt, Oklahoma, Henry McMaster, South Carolina, Kristi Noem, South Dakota, Bill Lee, Tennessee, Spencer Cox in Utah, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, Jim Justice, Big Jim Justice in West Virginia, former Democrat, Mark Gordon in Wyoming. So all of these people have come out and said, it is time to stop this. And we stand with Texas in exercising their constitutional rights to stop it. Now, meanwhile, the federal government, their posture on all of this, as this is heading towards an impasse, is earlier this week, DHS sent a letter to Texas demanding access to that 2.5-mile stretch of border in Eagle Pass called Shelby Park, the area that Texas has done so well fortifying and occupying. But again, it's only a very small portion of the border. So much of it is still wide open, but Texas apparently doing what they can. And DHS is saying even that portion of the border needs to be opened. And you have until Friday to do it, they say. You have until Friday. See if I can't quote from this in a moment for you. The DHS letter. Also, Donald Trump has weighed in within the last hour on this subject as well. I will share his statement. Okay, the number of governors apparently is growing who are co-signing this thing. I see our buddy Greg Price. You heard him on the program yesterday. He indicates that now every Republican governor except for Governor Phil Scott of Vermont have signed on to this, saying it's Texas's constitutional right to defend our country, defend themselves against the invasion at the border. DHS's counsel has given Texas until tomorrow to confirm that they are going to provide access to Shelby Park to the Border Patrol. Of course, the federal government wants access so they can bring more illegals in. We'll see. Texas claims that they're going to stand strong in the face of all of this. I don't know what happens after tomorrow, but I do know that DHS has imposed some sort of artificial deadline on this. Additionally, Donald Trump is weighing in. On Truth Social, the former president, perhaps future president, indicating, quote, when I was president, we had the most secure border in history. Joe Biden has surrendered our border and is aiding and abetting a massive invasion of millions of illegal migrants into the United States. Instead of fighting to protect our country from this onslaught, Biden is unbelievably fighting to tie the hands of Governor Abbott and the state of Texas so that the invasion continues unchecked. In the face of this national security, public safety, and public health catastrophe, Texas has rightly invoked the invasion clause of the Constitution and must be given full support to repel the invasion. We encourage all willing states to deploy their guards to Texas to prevent the entry of illegals and to remove them back across the border. He's calling on all Americans to support these common sense measures. A great statement from Donald Trump. Again, a very live story. We'll bring you the updates as they come. Charlie Spearing tells us about a spectacularly awful vice president, Kamala Harris, moments away.